Students, if you'll come up here to the front of the room. Yeah.
Everyone will rise.
Go ahead, students.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Stevens, will you call roll, please?
Mr. Spano,
Present.
Mr. Benson, present. Mrs. Dahl is absent this evening. Mrs. Dunaway,
Here.
Mrs. Heatherly.
Here.
All right, for the folks here and as well as the public here, Ms. Dow had her baby, and so that's the reason she is not with us this evening. Congratulations to her and her family. Little girl, Sophia.
Adeline.
Adeline.
Adeline Luno.
Okay, name corrected.
Adeline and Sophia are both cool names.
All right. So, again, congratulations. Moving on to the agenda, the superintendent, assistant superintendent report.
Right. First, I just want to thank all those that attended today, as well as those that were behind the scenes pulling it together. We had a wonderful senior citizen breakfast this morning, and just I had a house full there at LT Ball. So it was a great day and a great morning, and wonderful students also sharing their talents and skills. So just a very positive piece as we move into the holiday season. With that being said, our first item this evening is really about mental health and wellness as a discussion, and really about the growing need with today's youth. And so we have our guidance counselor is going to help us along with that to provide a presentation. So we have Mrs. Schmidt as well as Mrs. Tooley, and we're excited to hear
Can
from
we
you.
come
Yes,
on
you
this
can,
way?
absolutely.
Great. Thank
Welcome
you.
to the floor.
Oh, thank you. I feel like I'm back in my teaching days. Thank you, guys. I'm gonna give you guys some handouts.
Sure.
We'll kind of,
Thank you.
I'm just gonna have you pass them down.
Yeah,
I only
sure.
printed off 5, I apologize, you guys
Fine.
may have to share,
We'll share.
and we'll walk you through kind of what this stuff is. Thank you guys for allowing us to, or giving us some time to talk about this. It's obviously something that is super important and kind of a big thing right now, happening, I guess I would say, all over the country. So, and it gives Ms. Schmidt and I, we both have, between the two of us, 5 kids under 2.5, so gives us some time to actually talk to some adults. It's great. All right. So what we wanted to do was go through a couple things that we have kind of collected both as a school counseling department and with our administrators. Both the high school and the middle school work pretty closely with our administrators when we do have students that we work with who have some mental health situations that arise. And unfortunately, it's on the rise. So we wanted to start and go through just, I know we don't have much time, but just some statistics. These are national statistics that we pulled from. And there's a link at the bottom. We can share this information with you guys if you would like to take a peek at it. But kind of a disclaimer, the data we took, the National Alliance on Mental Health, they produce statistics for youth that are ages 13 through 18. So we took some of the statistics that we thought are sticking out and glaringly, and then kind of made it a little smaller for us to look at what that would look like in Tipp City. And another kind of disclaimer, this data is for 13 to 18-year-olds. In the middle school, about half of our population is 13, 14, or 15. So this doesn't include our 6th graders and a piece of our 7th graders. Number 1, suicide is the second leading cause of death for this age group. That's just awful, and it's the truth right now. 1 in 5 children ages 13 to 18 will have some kind of serious mental health illness. So we just said, looking at in Tipp City, what that would equal: 62 middle school students and 156 high school students. 11% of youth have a diagnosed mood disorder. Again, Tipp City, that would be 34 middle school students and 86 high school students. 10% of youth have a behavior or conduct disorder, which is a pretty serious label to get on yourself. or for a student to have. That would equal 31 middle school students and 78 high school students. And this number, I think, shocked us as a counseling staff and our administrators, because we felt like this was very low. But 8% of youth have a diagnosed anxiety disorder, and in Tipp City schools that would be 25 middle school students and 62 high school students. That number, I think we would say is,
Yeah, it's probably just what's diagnosed, so.
yeah,
I would think that'd be like 50, because
Yes.
it's pretty common.
it's very common.
Very common.
Yeah, it's very common.
Some of these would be the same students, correct?
Correct, that is very true. Some of these students will have, they call it comorbid disorder, so they could have all of them, correct. So that is definitely not a numbers that in Tipp City, but that's just what the numbers would look like. So then we started talking K through 12. We meet monthly as a guidance staff, just talking about some of the issues we're seeing in the schools, families that we work with, and how to support them the best way we can. So just some of the information that we wanted to share with you guys. This is just very brief. We could share more statistics with you. 30% at our high school level of the visits to see their school counselor is social emotional related. If you think about it in high school, they're doing a lot of academic, college prep, career, they're looking at a lot of different things. 78%, and again, this number is when I came back from maternity leave, I just started gathering data, which was in September. 78% of students coming to see me are for social emotional concerns. Makes sense, they're in middle school, they're trying to figure out their emotions and deal with a lot of different things. At the elementary level, I thought this was very, very high. This was K through 3. 44 students are seen for anxiety and depression symptoms, 21 with traumatic backgrounds, and 21 students that are seen regularly for some kind of turbulent home life. And we also felt like this last kind of statistic was eye-opening. So far this year, 1 student at the elementary, 2 at the middle school, and 2 to 3 at the high school level have been in some kind of inpatient mental health facility. Which I don't know how much many of you know about that, but it is expensive and it is difficult to be in an inpatient stay. So it was serious enough for the child to get to that point. Oh, this looks beautiful, but
Yeah.
it looked better when we did it, I promise. So as a counseling staff and as an administrative staff, we reached out to see, okay, what school systems do have mental health services? And so this is a list of the schools in the Miami Valley that do have some kind of mental health service, whether it's a school-based therapist. What else do they have on site? They could
Like
have
crisis counselor, just different agencies or hospitals that they have a licensed mental health counselor in the building. That doesn't mean that it can mean anywhere from 1 to 2 days a week. It can mean some schools have up to 3, I mean, those are the bigger schools, but some of them have up to 3 therapists in their building every day. Again, the list, I don't know why it reformatted, but Upper Valley Career Center, Miami Valley CTC, Beaver Creek, Centerville, Troy, Miami East, Northmont, just to name a few that do have some, and some of them are new. Some of them, Miami East, I believe they just started this school year with an agency. So there are more and more schools that have had it for a while. Like I think we went to a conference where West Carrollton kind of has had something in their building for a while, whereas some of these schools are newer and are getting more and more services. So kind of to show you just a comparison, especially from the high school level, of what does this mean when 30% of our students were coming, or the reasons to see their counselor, 30% were coming for socially, emotionally related reasons. So just to kind of put it in perspective, as the high school guidance team, we find it really important to meet with all of our students at least once throughout the school year. So when we call down a student, we call it a grade level meeting. So right now we're currently, we have met with all of our freshmen. So I know in my caseload I have about 80 freshmen. It takes me about 2 to 3 minutes to talk to each of those freshmen. We go through a sheet, we kind of talk about grades. I mean, sometimes on average they can go higher if they have more questions or if they have troubles with grades. Senior meetings or assistance with Common App, students that come down that need just a little bit more help with those things. Average around 4 to 5 minutes, some are more. Advisory, we have the advisory period. Us counselors are going in, we're doing lessons, whether it be in career and academic. We are trying to do more of that social emotional piece. But that's 18 minutes, and we're reaching a group of about 18 students in that time. The minute meetings Ann does at the middle school, so she does 2-minute meetings with all of her students, which is 614 students. We are the 504 case managers, so we have to implement and monitor those plans throughout the year. There are 15 at the high school. There are 3 counselors, but don't think that that divides evenly. There is a certain counselor who has more than others on their caseload. And then there are 29 at the middle school with the 1 counselor there. And she is monitoring all of those 504 plans.
That's a lot.
And then as far as testing, I just kind of did the most recent, which is end of course. Those take about 2 hours, and the makeup exam, that took up all 3 of the counselors. We were all proctoring. So then let me show you the mental health perspective. When we do a suicide assessment, ideally, and this is with the old assessment that we have, it takes 2 counselors to do that. And that could take anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. And that does not include the parent phone call or the referral. So just to kind of compare it, that I could have met, 2 to 4 minutes with my freshmen, I could have met it with about 10 of them in the same time that I had to talk with a student about mental health. Because on average, when a student comes down to talk to me because they're depressed or they have anxiety, they're down there for about a class period, which at the high school is about 49 minutes. Because really, they've come down and there's no way that they're getting back to that current class that they're in. We try to talk about some coping strategies, how can we get you through the day. So just to kind of put it in perspective that, when 30% of the kids, or reasons that they're coming down are to talk to us, that may sound, well, it's only a third, but we're spending so much more time with that 30%. So what are things that we're doing? We are trying to be proactive. We are trying to have current practices. One thing that when Mr. Bierhoff came on as principal, we started a mentoring program, and one of our counselors right now is working with those mentors, trying to get them more training so that we can have a mentor program where our students would be paired up with a mentor from Ginghamsburg Church. Again, not a mental health counselor, but again, some kind of proactive, letting them know that they have an adult role model. We also implemented the advisory, and at the middle school, the Red Devil period. I know that us counselors at the high school, we go into the advisories, we do lessons. At the elementary level, they do classroom counseling. I know Hannah and Brett do a lot of class lessons about peer skills, social skills, those kinds of things. K through 5, they do groups. They have the time and the resources to do groups. But a lot of the groups that Hannah and Brett reported that they're working on are boys-girls anxiety groups and students that have suffered some kind of trauma. Those are the groups that they've been working on. We would like to, and in your handouts that Ann gave to you, we are trying to update our assessment of suicide risk. We have the old and the new. The new one that we'd like to have approved is the ASQ. It is a more quicker assessment piece for us. Like I told you before, when we are doing suicide assessments, with the checklist that we had, there was a lot of subjectivity. It took 2 counselors to do it. We feel like with this, and this is something that is evidence-based, we feel like we would have a more thorough and consistent way of being able to know which students we need to refer, that we need to call parents and say, you need to get your student assessed by a mental health professional. All other services that we have are reactive because we don't have the time or the resources to be proactive. And then the terrace metrics, which I believe Mr. Bierhoff or Dr. Kump will be talking about later. That's something that is coming hopefully in January 2019. As a staff training, we at the high school have had the Tri-County Board come in and do a presentation just about mental health information. I know that Mr. Gingrich brought in mental health first aid. I think that some staff attended. I know us counselors attended the whole 8-hour training. As far as the survey, that is something that's also included in your handouts. And just a couple of things that I wanted to reference that I just thought was important from that were some of our...
This survey was given to the high school and middle school staff, just so you guys know kind of the teachers who took this survey.
So the comments are on the last 2 pages. And some of the questions on the survey were just not about, we wanted to see how are we doing as counselors to make our staff known about what we are doing, how informed are they about mental health and what they can be doing in the classroom, and what can we help, what can we do to be helping them. So the last 2 pages are comments. I'm obviously not going to read through them all, but there's a couple that really stuck out to me. It seems there are more and more students with severe mental health issues in our classroom. I feel ill-prepared in dealing with these mental health issues. I'm concerned about students who feel isolated and that they don't have someone trusted to talk with. We really lack these services in Tipp City. We are not immune to these issues. We need to be proactive in helping our students. We should have a full-time person at both middle and high school, given what we know about the importance of mental health in our students. Identification of mental health issues and early intervention is so important to school setting. I think it's something that takes a team approach. Providing a support system with professionals is very important. And the last comment that just stuck out to me, I've only been in education for 10 years. This person put, we have had a PD session at a staff meeting, but I don't feel this is enough. It is my belief that learning can't happen unless we address mental health, and the need is growing. I've been in education for 20 years and believe rapport is strength of mind. As much as I know about our students, I don't feel qualified to make a threat assessment. I believe the addition of a mental health therapist would be a valuable asset to our building. So again, multiple comments that you could read through. We did survey staff about how they felt as far as mental health affecting the safety, mental health affecting the classroom. That's what the last 2 questions are, and you'll see that I think it was over 80% ranked it a 5 or higher in both safety, that it affects safety, and that it affects learning. We are fortunate to have a social worker, Ms. Vicki Kaesler. We want to just talk a little bit about her services and what she's been doing. So her areas of focus are social, behavior, and academic. So she does have 42 students on her caseload. Just this year, she's had 14 student referrals. She's looking at 2 more after break. But a lot of these, so I would say almost about half of these students are on IEPs, and they are noted with services in their IEP. So as far as her addressing the mental health component, that also isn't feasible with the minutes and with the services she needs to put and provide for those students on IEPs. But we are trying to utilize her as a resource as well. But again, there's a greater need. So things that we're working on as a department, again, what are we trying to do? How are we trying to be more proactive about this and kind of working with what we have? We meet monthly as a district, counselors, to kind of talk about what do you see in your building, what can we be doing together to kind of address certain issues. The middle school and high school counselors have been QPR trained. QPR is a suicide prevention training, so it's for question, persuade, and refer. So how do you address kids that are in crisis? We've been mental health first aid. Ann and I went to a conference. It was put on by UD. It was at Dayton Children's, and it was a conference on mental health. We went to that. Ann and I also attended the OSBA conference on Hope Squad, which is a student-led initiative about suicide prevention, and PBIS for mental wellness. Rachel Everhart, Ronnie Labick, Hannah Grass all went to the All Ohio Counselors Conference this year, and they went to different sessions, but some that focused on mental health. And Brett Elliott at LT Ball, and then myself, we met with the lead social worker from Dayton Children's because they are opening a behavioral center in July 2019, so we want to have that rapport, we want to have that relationship with them, so when we need to refer kids, we have that already built in. So what are we proposing? What are things that we would like to see that we feel like would help our students, our staff, and our community? The school-based mental health therapist, that is a huge need. The ASQ assessment for suicide assessment of children, the Terrace metrics. We would like QPR training for our staff. That QPR is what I just talked about, the question, persuade, and refer. It was a quick 90-minute training that was very helpful, very hands-on, and just able to kind of get the information and be able to assist a student in crisis. Continued and consistent mental health training for all staff. Potential for future, After Ann and I attended the OSBA conference on the Hope Squad, we would like to do student-led initiatives, maybe get QPR training for our high school students, because let's face it, peers are telling peers when they're in crisis. They're the first people that they go to, so we need them to be trained as well. And then we as counselors are trying to think of what do we want to do as a district-wide mental health referral process, and along to how do we transition that kid back to school, because that was something that I think came up in our survey that we found we're not doing the best job at. So how do we help that kid get back to school? How do we help teachers know what to do and how to work with that student? So the last thing, what does a school-based mental health therapist do? People that we've talked to, these are the different services that they could provide. Obviously, on-site individual counseling, and that's huge. I mean, the biggest thing of why it would be helpful to have a school-based mental health therapist is because we can refer students to counseling till we're blue in the face, but there are a lot of things that there are barriers that are blocking those kids from getting the help. Maybe it's lack of money, maybe it's lack of transportation, maybe it's the stigma, whatever it may be. But if we have someone on site that can provide counseling to those students, that would be huge. As far as crisis intervention, group counseling. At the high school, every year we talk about, we're gonna run this group, we're gonna do this group, and we just get bombarded with everything else that we have to do. The mental health therapist would do group counseling, grief group, self-esteem group, anxiety, students who have suffered from a trauma. They would be able to lead the suicide prevention program for students and staff, provide interventions, link to the services in the community. So they'd be able to, and we have students and parents ask for referrals. We have a handout that we give them, but this person would really be a greater resource of information. They would also be able to provide education to parents about things that they can try at home. I mean, mental health is not just something that happens at school, it's happening at home as well. So they would be able to give parents information. As far as the staff and school services, they would be able to observe students and provide interventions for teachers that are teaching that student. They would be able to provide that QPR training for the staff. A huge thing is, a lot of the time we have to refer out for a student to get assessed. This person would be able to perform those assessments. Sometimes we have students that are a threat to themselves or to others. It could be a student in crisis, it could be a student for discipline issue. This person would be able to assess them to see if they are a threat.
Can I jump in real quick? I
Sure.
know we're kind of running out of time. We don't want to monopolize the time. Along this line of risk assessments, and I don't know how familiar you, kind of what's going on in Dayton, Kettering Behavioral Health is where we often refer kids to be seen to have some kind of risk assessment done. They're closing their doors to adolescent and youth treatment and kind of the likes, because Dayton Children's is opening their own program in July. But with that said, those 24 beds are going to be for all of Dayton. And as you know, we're kind of talking about this. We're not the only community who is seeing this. So just that risk assessment piece is huge, because we have often our phone calls go unanswered at Kettering, and sometimes we just say take them to the emergency room. Like that's your best bet right now. So sorry, that was my little.
Oh, no, thanks. And the last piece, they'll be able to provide mental health education for all staff. So again, this is just some of the services that would fall under the school-based mental health therapist. That should be it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know you spent a lot of time putting that together, and it's extremely helpful to see nationwide, and when you boil that down, what does that look like in Tipp City?
Mm-hmm.
I know we've really tried to make an effort to be proactive about it, and was very excited about bringing Vicki Kaesler in for the social worker for 5 days this week. Last year it was 3 days a week that she was in her district, but as we can see, it continues to grow, and that the need continues to rise, and that's just not covering everything. Also, I was just thinking about, as superintendents, and I'll provide that in the Friday board update, superintendents in Miami County, we compiled a letter and signed off on it, and that is for Kettering Health as well as Premier Health, and now they're submitting it after the business advisory, the county business advisory meeting this afternoon. We'll be submitting that to the Dayton Children's And it is just saying that the need is growing and what can they do in partnership with our districts across Miami County. So we're kind of having a voice together of really saying that this need is growing and that we know that there are some services that are shutting down and that there's a transition, but just helping them to be aware that we see the growing need and hopefully that they can meet us halfway or help support this, help brainstorm that. And then I just wanted to kind of really make a segue, maybe it's item C, but it's for the terrace metrics. Is there anything that, as a board, you have questions for Mrs. Tui and Mrs. Schmidt before we move on to the terrace metrics?
I know that Dayton Children's isn't opening until July, and I think I read, isn't there only 18 beds? Did I read
There's-
16 or 18 or?
We were told 24 single beds.
Okay.
Which will fill up, like Kettering
Yeah, but they're
Behavioral
already
does double
filled, like, there's
rooms.
nothing.
Yeah, but the nice thing about Dayton Children's is the whole kind of wing is, they are ready to assess right there. And if it truly is, if they're full, they're ready to refer out to Columbus, to Cincinnati, which their beds, I worked in Cincinnati for 10
Yeah.
years and their beds were always full in Cincinnati.
What's the gap? When Kettering closes to July, what's the gap on that? Do you know when, you don't know when Kettering's closing?
No, but I think they understand the kind of,
Sure.
that they need
Right,
to wait until Dayton Children's is ready to go.
Okay.
I believe, but
Right.
again,
right,
I could be.
right, we're not Kettering, so I was
Right.
just curious.
Right.
And I think that, I know there's a lot of information that comes out in Friday board updates, but the Get Part counseling is a piece that I brought up prior, that we just have had discussion with the high school in regard to that. And I think it has some real promise for us. And once again, these services do come with a cost, so as we're looking at staffing for next year, with the Get Part counseling, it is a piece that ultimately they would not be able to serve us until next year because the need is so great. But yet it's be important for us to be on their queue list if we were going to access that. Anything, Mr. Virgo, if you want to add about the Get Part or
Well,
any
I
aspect
think
of this?
just in general with what Mrs. Tui and Mrs. Schmidt have said, you know, our area of expertise is education,
Right.
not mental health. And as we're seeing more and more students coming to our counselors with mental health needs, it is outside of their area of expertise. And so, you know, the terrace matrix, which Dr. Kumpf will talk about here in a little bit, will do an excellent job as a vendor assessment in identifying students that are at risk. My concern, and I think our counselor's concern as well, is once we've identified these students as being at risk for anxiety, depression, self-harm, school violence, things of that nature, what is our responsibility? And I would say that our responsibility is quite great once we've identified those things. As we pull the layers back and we see that we've got these students with these issues, we need to be able to provide services and step in and say, parents, here's some help for your son or daughter.
Right.
So you listed a number of districts up there that were implementing different mental health. How many of them have actually or are implementing a mental health counselor? I mean, what is the norm out there right now in the area as far as a mental health counselor when it comes to the school district?
Meaning a therapist.
Through a
Yes.
therapist, right?
Really it ranges, like Miami East, they have someone from New Creations, it's a counseling agency here in Tipp. And they are there, I think, twice a week. There are different districts, like Kettering has 3 people, I believe, from South Community that are there throughout the week. So it really just varies. I mean, when I sent out, since I'm the liaison between us and CTC, I sent out an email through the thread, and all the schools that responded back, the ones that have Get Heart counseling, they are there every day throughout the week. So it really just depends on the school, but I would say for the most part, all the schools that responded have a mental health therapist in the high school at least 2 days a week or more. Some have more, some like I said, your bigger districts like Kettering, they have 3. Centerville, I believe, has 3. So it really just depends on the school district.
I came from Mason where we had one at every building. We were big enough too, but we had 3 in our high school just alone. So it's very common, I think, in this area and some of the other school districts to have a school-based therapist on site.
And they call them different things, like
Right.
Northmont, I think it's called their crisis counselor, crisis intervention counselor. But it just depends on the title, but all these schools have had one at least, or have one starting this year.
I think the important thing is that you already wear so many hats, and this is something that requires its own training. Some people go to school for just this, so it's not fair to put this on your staff, because it's not what you're trained for. So it's time to let the people, the professionals who are trained to do it, because the need is there and it's time, so.
And we'll keep plugging away at these kids and working
Yeah.
with them, that won't ever
Right.
change. And we'll still always be involved if we do have a school-based therapist or we do have services on site. That will always, I think, be a team partnership.
Thanks.
Thank you guys for the time, we
Thank you.
really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to go to item C, if that's okay, which is the terrace metrics. I think it fits very well right now with our conversation. And I've handed your way a terrace metrics. It's a particular piece that is out of an information packet that they provided us. First, I want to say that Teresa Dunaway, one of our board members, has been very instrumental in helping us actually locate this resource at OSBA. This is one of the individuals that was there and was providing information. And certainly the mental health and wellness is a piece that it has a growing need, as we were just hearing. This is basically a dashboard of information, and I just think it's extremely powerful when we look at the entire aspect of this metrics. And I think that when you see, it is an individual assessment, and it actually begins at grade 3 and can span all the way up to 12th grade. We are looking at a beginning point at our middle school and high school as and actually at second semester. I've spoken with Treasurer Mr. Stevens, and he said that we will be able to have the funds to cover this. It is at a prorated price, but I think the power in it, as you see, and there is a parent sign-off before a student would take the assessment. But it will break it down into a priority scale. It looks at the indicators as far as anxiety, bullying, the aggression, depression, those kinds of things. And then it really looks at the other aspects about what they call the resiliency indicators, which I think is very important as well, and indicates that they would take it 2 times, once in the fall and then also then in the spring. And you look for movement forward, that it's bettering, or the other aspect, in some you're hoping that it lessens, say for example in areas such as anxiety. You hope that with intervention that's been able to decrease. There is the aspect that, you see there's different categories, and so it would be at risk, suboptimal, average, and then optimal. And so certainly we would like to have our students in that healthy area. As we spoke with the gentleman, Rich Gilman, he is a school psychologist by his initial training, so he has a very strong background in this aspect, but also with schools, which makes it very, very nice, because he understands what's going on with schools and what the growing need is. Very research-based. It is not a diagnostics tool. It is it is an informational piece of data, and that's where I think it's very helpful, because what we could resurface from this information is someone that is a little bit what I'll call under the radar, someone that we're really not thinking that has difficulties or that has these areas that's growing, but that may be something that they are dealing with, and that this would trigger that for us, so that we would reach out to them and begin really monitoring, seeking out, and if need be, actually contacting a parent about a concern. So I think it has a lot of value. I think that they indicated that they can maintain information for over 4 years, so that we can really watch patterns and shifts and changes, hopefully progress in the healthy direction for our students. One of the things that we talked about would be really referring to it as a life skills assessment. sometimes when we talk about an aspect of mental health and wellness, that there's, I don't want to use the word stigma, that sometimes there's a little fear about, what does that exactly mean? But truly, these are, particularly with our youth, they are developing life skills. How do you handle things? Who are resources that we can go to? How do I gain support when I'm needing that? And once again, things that as a school, maybe years ago, we were not in quite the driver's seat on that, or the need might not be as great, but in today's world, we see a growing need for it. And I do think it's important for our district to acknowledge that and really start reaching out to our students and supporting our guidance team, that they're seeing a growth and it's more than what they can handle. And sometimes, once again, without having large blocks of times with students, it's difficult to get to these levels of conversation where some of these things would actually surface. Mrs. Dunaway, anything that you want to add to that?
Well, what I really like about this piece is it takes the guesswork out of it, because one of the things the guidance counselor said is they really don't know. You kind of just have to guess, and nobody wants to guess because you don't want to call a parent and maybe you're wrong. The other thing I like is having the 4-year snapshot, and because we are kind of in a unique situation, our kids change buildings 5 times. So if we see that, they have anxiety and ostracism, you might say, oh, well, yeah, this kid always doesn't like changing buildings. So then you can go to the parent and say, hey, do you notice a little bit of anxiety in your child every time they change buildings? And then you can talk to the child. You can kind of work them through. If you have this assessment, you can kind of be prepared for that.
Sure.
So it lets us take the guesswork out of it and be ahead of the curve. And I think that's really huge. So I think it's wonderful.
Right, that hope, I think I agree, with the aspect of looking at patterns, and sometimes it's difficult to get to the root of the problem, but we may have some insights about what they're dealing with.
Yeah, and this assessment is 113 questions, and there's all kinds of safeguards built in. For instance, if somebody takes it way too fast, they can tell. If a person is kind of faking it, they can kind of tell. Because Dr. Gilman is on the PTSD board at Cincinnati Children's, this is what he does. So he has built all these, basic safeguards in there so that when you get the test, you can kind of tell that too. They've basically thought of everything. So it's pretty phenomenal.
And then I'll mention that at the 3rd grade level, that's like a 50 question
Oh, yeah,
survey.
yeah, the
So
3rd
it
grade.
looks a little bit different
It's- yeah.
at the different levels, but.
Right.
Mr. Verhoff, anything that you wanted to add?
I think you both hit the highlights. Again, my main concern is that, once we've identified these students, that if we don't have the resources to be able to meet the needs of these students, that's a concern.
Right.
Quick question on,
Yes.
in using it, which students would take it? I mean, once there's an identification that there's a problem, they would have the student or ask the
Well, that's
student to
up
take it?
Yeah,
Right.
that's up to us. It's designed for grades 3rd through 12.
Right.
So we thought we could start at the high school, see how that goes, then do it at the middle school. It's,
But I mean, are you talking about just certain students?
oh no, you can do it for
It'd be
everybody.
all
Every
Yeah,
students.
it's $3, it's only $3.50 per student.
Okay.
And then in September, it goes up to, was it $7? Or
Six.
Six, which is nothing. Most comparable products like this are $14 per student. And you can take it 3 times. If a student has something happen,
But parents could opt out? if
Yes,
they
they
want.
yeah,
I mean, it's-
Yes,
Yeah, you can
I
absolutely.
can
opt out.
see some parents saying, this is a little intrusive, I'm not sure.
Yeah, you can opt out, we're not gonna force people, but,
Sure.
if you can, me as a parent, if somebody can come to me and say that my 8th grader has anxiety, I would want, that, to me, I would, thank you, Tipp City Schools, let me work on that, let me, mentor my child through that, because that is something they're gonna deal with for the rest of their life. College exams, life,
Sure, but,
losing your job, all of that
no,
stuff.
that's a good point. But some parents may say, well, yeah, I know, we were already dealing with it.
We're not
He
gonna force
already has a
people,
doctor.
yeah, we're not gonna
Yeah.
force people,
No, I
it's
know,
their
I just-
option.
Yeah, I understand.
Right. And actually, this first round, we're looking at both middle school and high school, because as Mrs. Tui was
Yeah.
saying, there's a growing need there. We just have the one counselor at the middle
Right.
school. So if our thought is that we will move forward for January implementation of this with, once again, the parents sign off and opt out as a family if they choose not to. But that we would look at every middle school and high school student, that we would provide the opportunity for this, for feedback and information for both our schools and for the family. And if an information sheet much like this would be what a family, and certainly our staff, our guidance counselors would be able to receive. And the turnaround is amazing.
Oh,
It's
in
about
September, it's gonna be real time, but now it's
like 2 hours, 1 to 2
Yeah.
hours, yeah, which
Yeah.
is amazing.
unbelievable.
Any other questions or thoughts on that?
So when you're talking about individual results,
Mhm.
but you can also look at collective results,
Yes.
so you can see
4 year.
how are our eighth graders doing and take some
As a group.
statistics as a group and use that information.
That's a very good question. I am assuming because of the power of the instrument that we could.
They didn't really get into that, it's pretty much just individual focus, not to say that you couldn't, but that's not what he focused on. He focused on just assessing individual by individual, so that we could follow up with the counseling needed if necessary.
Right. I will inquire about that because he's very responsive.
Once you have the data, I don't know why you couldn't.
To see if we're seeing
Yeah.
trends. Certainly, we could on our own basis to see what kind of trends we're seeing, but if there would be something that the actual program would be able to provide us, that would be extremely meaningful too.
Well, our school counselors in their presentations provided us some subjective and objective information. I think we would provide objective information and compare those trends to other eighth graders nationwide. and what's going on.
I think in that booklet that we got,
Yeah,
I
that
think
big
that
one.
there was information that showed how you could,
There's a school report in
there's
that.
a,
Yeah,
right,
there's-
there's a report in there of the whole
Okay.
school. So
I will look further.
Yeah, because once you have the data, you
you
can
can
do whatever
sort it
you
Yes,
out.
want.
exactly.
Yeah,
So,
So, getting back to Mr. Bierhoff's comment, I mean, that's sort of what I'm thinking about. We institute this in January, and we've got these real-time results, and we've got some data that says that we need some counselors or mental therapists,
Sure.
whatever. I mean, you know, are we prepared, or where are we at with now the next step, if you will, by moving forward
Right.
with this? I mean, I don't want to put something in place that we're not prepared for the follow-on actions that may be.
sure. And that's a great point, because we're talking about adding, a school mental therapist. So this would kind of give us the information to see if the need's there. And one of the options on this test is, if you are in this red area, they have a teletherapy where you can talk to a therapist on the phone. So if it's transportation's an issue or privacy's an issue, you can do their teletherapist. So it's kind of,
that's an additional cost.
no, it's all included.
All,
Yeah, it's all included. So I think it's kind of give us the information on what the need is for staffing.
I think it'll provide us a baseline of information. And once again, I think that either it's going to substantiate that there is a very significant growing need, or once again, I think if it even alerts us to one student that once again, no way were we thinking that they needed support, or that, maybe their parents weren't even aware. Because often as our students move through the adolescence, they become a little bit more private about their own feelings.
Correct.
That I think it would be worthwhile. I understand what you're saying about the staffing. I think because the need is growing so much, that it's one of those things that it is going to be in demand, and you have to really get the dialogue going. But I do think that, once again, hopefully it will substantiate whether that need exists, so that when we're making our staffing decisions, we can feel confident that that is an area that we need to make an investment. And I think the other piece is that at a minimum, we're going to be able to let parents know if we see something that is a priority score, and we also will be able to, if need be, once again, utilize this online therapist to kind of bridge that piece.
And they also provide other letters. The letters that you would send home to a parent, they have all these letters already made up, rolling out the program. What letter do you send to which parent, depending on where you are on the metric. So they have all those letters already done for you.
And I hadn't thought of it until now, but even for that reach out to both Kettering, Premier, and Children's, data of this nature, they probably don't have it coming from other schools just yet. I think it
Yeah,
would be
that's
very helpful.
Yeah, that would be good for them.
do we know of any other schools in our area using this?
Oh, there's Kentucky and Cincinnati, not in the Dayton area now. Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati.
So you see the assessment being done during the advisory period or the Red Devil period, or how, I mean, is it computer-based? Walk me through what you're thinking on the.
Right. It is an online based. It does, I want to say though, it runs about
45 minutes.
Yeah, so that is longer than the advisory period. So we would, that's something that we'll work through the high school about their scheduling as well as the middle school.
Red Devil.
And the other piece that we'll have to work with, we'll probably do just a grade level at a time and maybe have an interval of maybe 2 days.
So that you're
and
not
then-
overloaded,
Right,
but
so
like
as
to your
they're getting
point,
the
Sam,
information
yeah,
back,
so
that
you're
they're
not
not
overloaded
delayed in
pacing.
really looking at that, and those that are higher priority,
Yeah.
that they're able to really start connecting, letting parents know, those kinds of things.
Yeah, they suggest one grade at a time, because what if you do have an overwhelming, at-risk group, and then you don't know how to handle that? You don't want to roll out all 4 grades and then not be able to handle that on the back end.
Mhm.
So one grade at a time.
So there'll be some pacing that will go
Yeah.
along with that.
And to caution, this is a risk assessment. It doesn't mean that people will act out based on what they're.
Right,
Right.
It doesn't mean anything.
It's
It just means that
information,
they're-
it's not
they're-
diagnostic, it's
Right.
information, data gathering.
It's a life skills assessment.
Sure.
Mhm.
And it sounds like this is something that our counselors, and then based on the comments from the survey of our staff, this would be one piece in moving forward and helping them feel more supported.
Mhm.
I think overwhelmingly the subjective comments from the survey, there's a pattern of responses of, we recognize the increasing need, but we don't have the resources and don't know what to do.
Or how do you handle it if you think a kid is, how do you approach,
Right.
what's the procedure? So this would, eliminate that,
Mhm.
that
And what's-
awkward, how do you
Right.
handle that?
What's the instrument to
Right,
use to
right.
help determine that?
Right.
Because it's not a suicide assessment, I mean,
Right.
it's.
Sure, it's a life
other
skills
aspects,
assessment,
right.
We need to
anxiety.
develop policies that, I could see some kind of privacy concerns coming up, or if a child had some kind of disciplinary action, and, maybe another child was the victim of that one, and that parent's demanding to see, well, let me see that
Oh.
terrorist matrix, and, he was real high on bullying, you guys didn't do anything about it.
Well, that
We
would,
have those kinds of concerns,
I asked that question to Dr. Gilman. It's being treated just like FERPA. We don't share
Okay.
any other
Yeah,
information.
that's bad.
They don't share the information, we own the information.
Okay.
Yeah, I asked that question when he came.
Good. Okay. Thank you for discussion. All right, as we move on, first, I know we have a guest this evening, and
We do.
Mr. I'll let you introduce.
Thank you. We have a list of student papers. We have a huge need at Nevin Copping at Broadway. Mrs. Barker and Mrs. Smith will be happy when Alyssa is able to report to work. She is an aide for some of our students with disabilities, and we've been looking for a while, and we were happy to have Alyssa Studebaker with us tonight. So I'm going to let Alyssa tell us just quickly about herself.
Okay.
And
Can I stand right
go ahead.
here?
Yep.
You're just,
Okay, good evening. My name is Alyssa Studebaker, and I moved to Ohio back in April after my husband served some time in the Navy. I began teaching 8 years ago at an early education center. I taught up to ages 13. That was for after school, before and after school. And in that time, I had the opportunity to teach children with a variety of needs. And so I'm just thankful to be here tonight and thankful for this opportunity, so thank you.
Alyssa spent time in Hawaii, and I couldn't figure out why she moved. She went to college in Hawaii, and I couldn't figure out why she moved back to Ohio, but.
That gets pretty old
Maybe it's
after
a
a
funny
while.
thing, people around.
So,
Good to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there.
so, very good. So, thank you, Alyssa, and you may go ahead.
yes, you
You
do.
may go
Thanks for
ahead.
being here this
Thank
evening.
you very
Thank you,
much.
welcome.
All right. Moving back up to item B, that's our facilities update, and so I just want to talk a little bit about that. Just all the things that we've been doing since our last board meeting, and things that we're looking forward to in the month of January. Mr. Pfister, myself, Mr. Stevens, as well as Mr. Sagona, we've been out to the building staff meetings, there's a presentation to share about what we've done most recently in the past with our facilities and where we're heading forward with that, and had a brief amount of time. It's a little hard during a staff meeting to get through all of that and have question and answer, but we did have some interaction and good engagement. So that was a very positive piece. We have now been able to accomplish that and make that all the way through all the buildings. The other thing that we've done is that we're looking ahead now. There will be in January a building question and answer timeframes. We have those dates established, and so we will spend time in each one of our buildings at the end of the school day, saying that anyone that has questions that they would like answered, and just to sit down with informal dialogue without presentation material, and just really hear from them and hear the engagement, and also do note-taking. We did, Mr. Zagone was very good. He did note-taking in each one of those presentations, so as questions came up, we do have a good log of that. So we're collecting that information. We're also working toward what we would call a fact sheet or questions and answers about facilities. So we'll be doing that, and as that goes forward, we'll actually be putting that on our website so that people in the community may have similar questions as well. We have what's called now a Program of Requirements Team, which is a POR. We have teacher reps on that, and we have been able to meet. We have 2 representations from each of our grade levels that are K through 5, and so I'll take that back, 2 representatives from each of the buildings. So that's a nice group, and we've had some good dialogue. Mike Richley came and spent some time with us as well, and we have gotten some insight in that. Interesting enough, as we go out in the buildings, we gain more insight as we have the diagram of what this potential building may be, and they're providing that to us, so that's part of the note-taking that's occurring. Community engagement series, we have those established, particularly beginning, our very next one will be January the 15th. So we look forward to that. That's when we'll have our community once again joining us together, and that will be actually at LT Ball, and that runs from 6:30 to 7:30. We'll try to keep those at an hour. The 3 dates that we have in place right now are January 15th, February 19th, as well as March 12th. So that's the series. We did a series last year, and we wanted to get that up and running once again. Excited about that. Each one of the stations will have a theme. Our first one will be about the ELF, that expedited partnership that we're having with the OFCC, the Ohio Facilities Commission, Construction Commission. Another aspect that we're putting in place is really coffee discussions, so we're getting that up and running. And that would just be informal discussions that we'll be able to have with our community members once again, and so we'll roll those dates out. In addition, we have a Hyatt Good Neighbor group, and that would be the neighborhood and anyone interested in our community that would like to come together to sit down and discuss when we would, with this change of the new construction, what that would involve, any concerns that they may have, and how that might impact their home or their residence, so that we might be able to think through that. We are doing a traffic study, so as we begin that kind of information, receiving that would be a group that optimally that we would definitely want to share that with. That information will also come out in our community engagement series as well. And then there is a group that's called the Broadway Future Site. And so I'll go back, the Hyatt Good Neighbor group, that's on January 22nd is our first one, and that will be actually held at LT Ball. The second group that I wanted to talk about is the Hyatt Future group, and that one will be on January 8th, and that will be in the multi-purpose room there at Broadway. And that will be a gathering of individuals that will look at the Broadway site, and will look at all kinds of options and just have some very positive dialogue about what are some things that we can consider. We're very thankful that the City of Tipp City is willing to meet with us, so that as we're looking at these things, that they have different zoning pieces that they'll be able to bring to that, so we can know what are the present boundaries or requirements, regulations that are in place, and if that's something that, as we look at future options, is that a piece that we might have to move forward with, whether that's the school district or whether that's someone else that may take that on. Realtors, once again, other individuals that may have interest in that site, certainly our community members. We are eager and willing to sit down that evening with them, and that will be at 6:30 once again on January the 8th. Additional things, Mr. Pfister, that you'd like to bring out about facilities?
I think you covered it.
Okay. Questions that you might have, anything that we're working on right now with facilities and getting information out to our community and trying to really connect with them to help them be informed?
Well, someplace along the line, we need to schedule probably a work session or two. I mean, I think we have a number of issues that we need to still talk about with regard to this, so I need to get that on the calendar here probably shortly to have happen, so need to start proposing some dates or some times to be able to do that.
January, with our organizational meeting, do we have a work session that connects with that? I know we did a year ago.
We usually do, we typically do.
We can, I mean, we don't have anything, right now, all that's scheduled is, as I understand it, is the actual
Okay.
organizational meeting, which
Right.
is on the 7th.
Okay.
We can do, I mean, at the organizational meeting, you typically will set up the rest of the thing, but we actually could set up a workshop in conjunction with that organizational meeting. We've done that in the past. So, I mean, that's the pleasure of the board, what they want to do with regard to that.
I'd endorse that as well. Maybe do
It's
that.
been tradition. So we're all here, so you might as well have a work session.
Right. And I do think we have plenty to talk about, and
Yeah,
there's some
we have a lot.
important decisions coming up.
Yeah.
Am I sensing a
Yeah.
consensus on that?
Work
As
session.
Having a work session with our organizational meeting on the 7th.
Organizational at 6, work session 6:30, that's what we typically do, right? 6,
Yes, because I
6:30.
think we have the records thing.
Well, you got the records thing before
That's
that.
at 6 usually, right?
Yeah, I think
Record
that
is
is
at 5:45.
5:45?
5:45.
We don't have any new board members this time, so,
Right,
you know,
right. Yeah,
So
the records thing is
that'll be
really
fast.
just,
it'll be fast.
It's, yeah, that's just,
Yeah, it's like 20 seconds.
there's nothing really new.
All right, so, right now, I'm projecting that Mrs. Prawl would get out invitations regarding, and notice that a 5:45 records, review and looking at that piece, then an organizational meeting at 6 p.m. and followed at 6:30 with a work session.
as I believe, we have talked about, we have some items at the organizational meeting that you also may be bringing to the board for approval, that we may take a couple steps on some actual motions for new needs or something.
Yeah, we would definitely need to look at moving forward with the resolutions to place a levy on the ballot for May, if that is the intention of the board for the potential building project. Well, I mean, we could put something in place for that, if we felt the need to move forward, or we could also just table that and not do it and set up another meeting if we feel we need to discuss further, so.
Should we do after the work session?
I definitely would want to invite, as I mentioned in earlier emails, the attorney and the
Right.
I think we want them there for the workshop, I mean, so.
Yeah,
I
they
thought
would be
there was a couple
there.
Normal business items that you had that you thought were gonna be needed at the organizational meeting. Don't remember, all right,
It's
we'll watch
been
for
a
the
pretty
agenda.
busy day and week, so right now, I don't have it at the tip of my brain, so I'm sorry.
Like the favorite fruit, she's like, well, talking about.
Yes, that very group, but that would be
That would
with
be at
the
the
work
workshop.
session.
Yes.
Yes.
No, I'm
Yes,
talking about.
and it may have been the Gephardt therapist piece that you may be thinking of, but I do know that we've had additional conversation, and it is something that we would have to do a projection for next year, because they presently do not have the staffing for us.
Okay, that might have been what it was, I
Uh-huh.
don't recall what it was.
Once again, ideally, I would have loved for us to, once again, even have that as a segue of moving into that, but their staffing is not in place for that at this time.
Could we explore other options related to that in the interim? I know that's not what we're on for the agenda, but I understand Gephardt's not gonna be available till next school year.
Mhm.
So if we move forward with this risk assessment and we're already identifying, social emotional issues with our students, could we look at new creation counseling center like Miami East is doing, or look into other mental health therapy services that could be contracted to get us through the remainder of the school year.
I would definitely do some extra exploration with that. I'll connect with Mr. Veerhoff and Mr. Suthers, since those two buildings particularly will be the ones using the instrument, and I'll definitely get information to you in the Friday board update.
Great.
Great. Okay. All right, moving on then. Alice, active shooter information. And just wanted to just do an update on that. We have now had our training. We had the training during our professional development with our staff, but we also moved forward then, and this past prior week, we actually provided training for our part-time cafeteria, the rest of our custodial staff that was unable to attend that day, and then as well as our bus drivers. It was a great session. We actually brought a bus on site for them to, when we moved into the scenarios, to actually get on the bus and talk about that, and just had a very strong response. I have a couple, what I would say, pretty powerful emails from those staff members saying how beneficial it was, how much they appreciate being included in it. And sometimes when you are a part-time person, you feel like you don't have all that information, and yet you want to always be prepared as much as possible. And even information from like cafeteria managers about the appreciation of having their staff to have the opportunity. So I felt very, very good about that. Excited to say on January 3rd, that's a community piece as well, that we will be having a community Alice training and information session that evening. That's at 6:30, and we'll run from 6:30 to 8 o'clock, and that's at LT Ball. And we're excited to really share what we're doing with our staff, but also strategies that would be helpful for any community member in today's world that is different than it was even a decade ago. So excited about that, and hope that there's a great turnout for that.
Are there any limits to the number of attendees who can come?
I think that once again, it's open to our community, but we're planning to have that, if need be. We'll start probably in the cafeteria, but if our numbers are greater, we will move to the gymnasium. So that would be able to house quite a number of community members. High school graduation pathways. I do have a handout for you on that. I hope I can put my finger on that very quickly. Here it is. This is a topic that has been in the Friday board update as well. Just want to say, please, that the state was hearing some of the concerns across the school districts, that we needed a plan for this year's graduating class. And would there be the ability to have what I would call some grandfathering in or extension of what was in place for alternative pathways, and they have been able to do that. There are some elements that you'll see in this particular handout. This is through BASA. They do provide some very good information pieces that looks at some of the things that there was a slight modification on some of the conditions, but certainly, you know, the alternative pathways are available to our graduating class, and that is a great support to them. It's extremely helpful to our guidance team as well, that's working with those students, and to our high school administration as well, that we watch and monitor our students as they're moving through to make sure that the positive piece for meeting graduation requirements is there, and when we have changes in the state level, we want to make sure that we know that those things, that we're on top of it so that we can support them to make those deadlines. All right. And then the next one is a very exciting piece. That happens to deal with our high school being named as an AP District Honor Roll. It's the 9th annual one, so they've not been doing it too long, but that is really about opportunities that we're providing our staff, and so Mr. Veerhoff, you did a great piece on that, of talking about this AP. At our January meeting, is the evening that they will actually have the banquet, and that will be in Columbus. So Mr. Veerhoff and several of our AP teachers are planning to attend that. And Mr. Veerhoff, while you do that, I know we had a person enter, and I just want to check on that individual.
Yeah, Liz is talking to him.
No, it's fine,
This is fine,
it's fine.
our
I think it's
reporter's
better.
dad.
Oh, all right, thank you. That was a new face for me, and I
Yeah, me
just
too.
wanted to make
Me too. I
sure
was like,
everything was
this is
in,
different.
okay,
That would
all
be
right.
A for alert.
That would be right, A for
I was like,
alert.
let's get that Alice training started, I don't know who this person is, seriously.
Yeah, all right, so we are good, and Mr. Beerhoff, anything that you want to add, other than we are excited about this?
Basically, what AP Honor Roll is the recognition by College Board for schools and school districts that increase access to AP curriculum for students while maintaining or bettering their AP exam average. And we were able to add AP courses, as I shared with the board, when we found out about this recognition with your approval, with adding the 2 courses in the Social Studies Department 2 years ago. That increased access. We nearly doubled the number of students who were taking AP exams. We maintained our test average as far as scoring a 3 or above on those. So we've been recognized with this award. We are one of 20 school districts in the state of Ohio, and we are one of 373 school districts in North America because College Board offers AP also in Canada. So between North America and Canada, we are one of 373. So it is a great honor and something that we'll celebrate on January 28th with the AP teachers over in Columbus.
What is the other class? It's AP Human Geography. What was the other one in the Social Studies Department?
We added AP World History.
That's right. World History.
And we also were able to increase our numbers in AP Art Studio by making that a standalone class rather than
Nice.
an independent study class that you would have, 1 or 2 students working alongside Art 1 students or Art 2 students. We dedicated an entire class period to that, and we've been able to increase our numbers from there. And Ms. Gentry has done an excellent job with building that program.
Well, thank you for bringing that to our attention. When you added those classes, obviously you knew what you were doing. So congratulations. And they're well attended. I know those classes, it's not like there's 10 or 15 kids. They're full every period, which shows, as you know, there was a need. So, awesome.
And actually, for the size of district, we have
There's a lot of kids.
a nice number of AP courses,
A lot.
so that's exciting. And I don't want to put you on the spot, tell me the number of AP courses that we provide.
We offer 10.
10. Okay.
That's great.
That is great. Thank you. All right, moving along then, we are now ready for curriculum update, and Mr. Gingrich.
Okay, just a couple things. We're working on science, and Mr. Hoffman's been busy working with us. We did have our vendor fair just after Thanksgiving on the 29th of November. Had a great turnout. We had, I think, 10 districts that came, and we had over 50 people there. It was really a full room. In fact, if we do it again, we may have to move out of the Miami County ESC. Had a great turnout. The vendors were very excited. We had 9 vendors there because the teachers, the people that were there, teachers and staff, and some of them brought pretty large contingents, got the opportunity to really interact. And one of our goals is to really align standards, and in science, that can be a little bit tricky because there are Ohio standards and then there are the NGS, the national standards, and they're close, but they don't always line up. And so really being able to talk through where those line up closely, and then we're really looking at the middle school to make sure they align closely in the future, because we're a little bit off kilter right now. So had a great turnout. The staff is working really hard. We used an electronic evaluation form that Mr. Sagona set up through Qualtrics, and that worked really well. Had numerous districts asking me, and Mr. Sagona wasn't there, so he didn't get any extra work, because otherwise he might have. And then we also, at OSBA, there was a presentation on a curriculum audit through Ashland University, and Dr. Kump actually went to that. I went to something on special education, but have really gotten close since then, have made several contacts. We did a contact with Piqua and Milton Union, so all 3 of us had a conference call, and it looks like it's something that all 3 of us are really looking to do, and it is Dr. David Silverberg of Ashland University is the person that is
is really heading it up. They've done 25 districts now. He's been really busy since OSBA. So we're trying to get in there soon. Talked to him actually just today, and I think we have some times that we're getting close to nailing down. And it assesses how we are aligning with the standards in math, English language arts, science, and social studies. And I've talked to the administrators as well and gotten great feedback, so that's something that's coming in. It was in the Friday board update as well, just some information about that. And I wanted to say, great presentations on the social and emotional learning too. That's, I know it doesn't fit, really, there's not a curriculum, social emotional learning, but it fits into everything. And I think looking at where we can plug it in and really be assertive and proactive is a real positive thing there. So thank you very much.
All right, the one thing I did want to mention, it goes back to facilities that we did have through Qualtrics. That's what made me think about it. Qualtrics, we did do a teacher survey, and we were able to get, I confirmed this afternoon, 75% response, which is good for a survey, very good. So right now we're compiling that data, and we actually have a session tomorrow that is a webinar piece with Qualtrics, and that they will help us really pull that information out, and we'll see what kind of feedback we get on that and what we can use from that. I think that's all I have for superintendent's report.
All right, moves us up to citizens' comments. And we have Mr. Watson, who would like to address the board on the future of our present schools. Mr. Watson, I don't think I need to remind you, in 5 minutes to speak to the board.
Yeah, I didn't have this written down, but I would say amen to what the ladies brought to us. I'm living with a counselor for 30 years and daughter's a social worker. I know the backside of what goes on, and it's not good, and it keeps getting worse with the evil in the world. And I would tell you, though, from my experience about 45 years ago, from taking basic youth conflicts in Chicago for 3 different seminars. Don't forget the church. I know people think the separation of church and state, but that was to keep the state out of the church and not tell you how to worship. So there's only 14% of our youth going to church and getting that input each week. So that's also a point that you can connect with. Okay, why I'm here tonight is to share information that I've looked into about the Broadway site, since I'm a preservationist and feel that it should be preserved one way or the other. Went there 50 or 60 years ago as a student, and also what we're going through now is in the world. It was a prime bomb shelter, and we had bomb shelter practices monthly, and so I think in looking to the future that we need to keep that in mind as far as school buildings and school shootings and what's going on. One thing that I heard the other day, we haven't even reached to the evil of these school shootings has been on theirself and getting in the school building, but not yet drive-by shootings. So I would just advise you to be careful in putting windows in the school. I know the other kids do better with light, but in other countries I've been to, they put the windows up 8 foot because a drive-by shooter has a hard time carrying the ladder with him and not being seen. The site at Broadway, as I was talking about, I went by, there's 28 home sites that border the school property, and the number one people that I think we need to be concerned are the people who touch the school property, 28 homes. They voiced their opinion twice. Once when they bought their house, they liked the neighborhood, and And second, when we tried to tear down and build a new school, the precinct voted against it. So I think we've heard from them and probably will hear more. On the county and city, I went to the courthouse. The property is like 39 lots now. I know you can't see that from there, but with 6th and 7th Street still goes through the properties, through the school property. The lots are like 49, I think there's around 39 lots. Only 16 houses that could be built today because the lots are only 49.5 wide and it takes 65 foot to build a home, so you'd have to use 2 lots per home. And there's all kinds, like we'll get into in the future meetings, of possibilities I think here. One is to preserve the buildings as they are for historical. They're 101 years old and about 60 to 70 years old. I think when I was on the planning board for Tipp City, we implemented the 0 lot line. I think it can be very usable with these older lots. I know you can go through all the rezoning, but then you hit headaches there. I know we had in the planning board, but I think I guess I would propose to you that contingent on financing, that I'd be interested in buying it to further that area. My ideas, so you know, would be to put the 1917 building and give it to the Historical Society, which is out of room.
30 seconds, huh?
Pardon?
30 seconds.
Okay. The other thing was a controversial thing maybe, but I've seen Heather and Adam signs in their yards. You know, immigrants being in Honduras and Guatemala, staying there for 2 weeks. I see a possibility of 0 lot lines and housing for immigrants. We've all been immigrants. Maybe it's controversial, but those people are human as we are human, and so I would do that. And also, that's a possibility. A church is a possibility. I would turn the Broadway gym into Olympic pool for high school. You know, I'm an athlete, watcher, athlete, swimming team, and cafeteria as a bowling alley.
Thank you.
Thanks, Don.
All right, president's comments. School break, or Christmas break coming up here in a few days. I'd like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and take some time and enjoy the family here while we got that little break, and it's a good time to do that. Good family time. Hope everyone enjoys the holidays. Prior meeting minutes we have attached to the agenda. I need a motion for those to be approved.
I'll make a motion.
Second?
Got a motion and a second from Joellen and Teresa. Any discussion, corrections, comments?
No, I already saw the corrections, thank you.
Yeah, just want to make sure that you guys all saw
Yep,
it. Thank you,
very
Joanna,
much.
for that.
Hearing none, please call roll.
Mrs. Heatherly?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunaway?
Yes.
Mr. Spano?
Yes.
Mr. Venters?
Yes.
Minutes are approved. Treasurer's report, we have a monthly financial report, need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
A motion and a second from Teresa and Andy. Mr. Stevens, would you like to talk to us about that report?
I hope everybody just read the comments on why we had some variances from this year to the previous years. Just the biggest one to note, and it's one that I point out all the time, our TPP funding that was phased out by the state. You'll notice that it is going to drop off. November 2017 was the last time, I take that back, it was November 2016 of fiscal year 17 that we got that last payment in the general fund. And even that was only around $30,000. It had dropped from $200,000 a couple of years before. So we've seen zero the past 2 years, and so that's just funding that goes away. It just highlights the importance of the state budget and
Sure does.
what that means for us. And our 5-year forecast has 2 budgets from the state in there. We don't know what's gonna happen, so we just gotta make sure that we continue to think for the future and try to make sure that we can be financially stable. So, other than that, we are dead on. If you look at our numbers, we're just moving along like normal, and it's wonderful to see. Nothing crazy happens, so I enjoy that here.
Makes your job nice, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it makes it.
Surprises aren't good in
The
your area.
surprises aren't good, but
Well, you
it's
do a
good to
nice
see.
job projecting.
Are there any questions or concerns that I might be able to answer for the board on this? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Hearing no questions, please call roll.
Mrs. Dunaway,
Yes.
Mr. Venters.
Yes.
Mrs. Heatherly,
Yes?
Mr. Spano.
Yes, that motion is approved. Next agenda item is the appropriation amendments for fiscal year 19. Need a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
Got a motion and a second from Joellen and Teresa. Mr. Stevens, what would you like to tell us about these?
Nothing fancy. We did have some slight increases here. You notice one of those is for the transfers out we're dealing with a little bit later here in the agenda. Pretty small amount this month, so.
Any questions? Call roll, please.
Mrs. Heatherly,
Yes.
Mrs. Dunaway.
Yes.
Mr. Spano,
Yes,
Mr. Venters.
Yes.
that motion is approved. All right, last item under the treasurer's report is some fund transfers. Need a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Got a motion and a second. Is that Joellen or Teresa?
I mean,
Teresa and Andy. Stevens, will you,
These are just the transfers for the students in the winter sports, once again, to help keep down the door-to-door fundraising, so I believe this program has actually been doing very well for those sports groups. They're very appreciative, so, especially Mr. Faust, very appreciative, so. But again, Mr. Faust and I will be looking into this to see if we need to continue in the future or if the funding is well set up for the groups, so. But I guess what I'm saying is this might not be a yearly practice to transfer the money in, so. We'll see.
okay, sure. Any questions?
Are you suggesting that maybe phasing out pay to play?
No, I'm suggesting transferring the money into the sports
Okay.
groups.
I want to clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah. I apologize, yes, that does come off very ambiguous, doesn't it?
Just want to be clear.
I didn't pick up on that.
Are we voting? Same
Yes.
We're ready to
Okay.
vote, please.
Mrs. Dunaway,
Yes.
Mr. Venters.
Yes.
Mrs. Heatherly.
Yes.
Mr. Spano.
Yes, that motion is approved.
Thank you.
Old business, do we have any old business? Seeing none, moving on to new business. Dr. Kump, will you take us through these?
Item A, motion to appoint a president pro tempore to preside over the organizational meeting on January 7th, 2019.
I'll make a motion.
Who would you like to preside?
No, I didn't, I said I'd make a motion.
Well,
So
the
we can
motion
discuss
is to
it.
designate a person to
Put a
preside
name with it.
over the,
I'm too new, clear that.
Are we
and follow the
nominating here,
rules.
Sam?
pardon?
Are we nominating here?
I would defer to my more senior board members to,
I'll nominate
Educate.
Sam to preside over that meeting just for, you know.
The organizational meeting.
Yeah. Continuity, that's the word I mean.
this isn't because you're going out of town?
Huh?
No.
No,
Okay.
this is
Do this
the
every-
organizational meeting. Somebody has to call the meeting to order and all of those things
And then you
until we
do
get to the
president.
point that you elect a new president for next year. So this is the person who's gonna run the meeting up until that point.
So clearly I'm not qualified.
So it's a 15-minute job. You want to be president
You
for
can have
15
the
minutes?
mantle for 15
I'll nominate
minutes.
Joe Ellen. I'll nominate Joe Ellen, she'll be president for 15 minutes.
It'll be
Be
our
fun.
longest 15 minutes ever like.
Or Andy, he's been vice 2 years.
Well, I have a
Teresa, are you
motion.
volunteering?
I need a second, or,
I'm keeping my mouth shut.
I'll second.
all right, so I have a motion and a second. Andy and Teresa.
All right.
Any discussion? Call roll, please.
Mr. Ventures?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunaway?
Yes.
Mrs. Heatherly?
Yes.
Mr. Spano?
Yes, that motion is approved.
I wouldn't want that job.
All right. Item B, approval of a 5-year depository agreement with the following banking institutions. Unity Bank located at 212 North Main Street in Piqua, Ohio. J.P. Morgan Chase Bank at 460 Polaris Parkway, Westerville, Ohio.
Looking for a motion? So moved.
Second?
Got a motion and a second. Andy and Teresa. Any discussion or questions?
No?
This is a standard 5-year
Yep.
agreement, done every 5 years.
Easy.
All right, call roll, please.
Mr. Ventures?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunaway?
Yes?
Mrs. Heatherly?
Yes.
Mr. Spano?
Yes, that motion is approved.
Item C, approval to accept the following resignations as per the agenda.
Need a motion?
I'll make, go ahead, Joan.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
I got a motion and a second. Teresa and Joellen, actually it's Joellen and Teresa.
Yep.
Sure.
Any discussion or questions?
My only question is, will we be replacing the educational aid?
Amy Cribs.
Yes.
as we can, yes.
Okay.
We actually have someone in place starting the new year.
Okay.
I mean, not full-time, but it's someone in there. We can't go without someone being there.
Great.
So that's one of the items that we might have on the organizational agenda to approve.
That'll be really quick, but we'll try.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Call roll, please.
Mrs. Heatherly?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunaway?
Yes?
Mr. Spano?
Yes,
Mr. Ventures?
Yes.
motion is approved.
Item D, approval to employ the following as classified staff for the 2018-19 school year pending proper certification and paperwork as per the agenda.
So moved.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. Andy and Joellen. Any questions, comments, discussion?
This was the young lady that we met this evening. And Galen, I will let, Mr. Galen, I'll let you kind of talk a little bit about the need that exists.
Well, we've been looking for a person for quite a while, and we have students at Nevin Coppic. Actually, Nevin really has a serious need with some of the things we talked about, social and emotional learning, really some behaviors that need help. Mrs. Barker is spending a lot of time in some of the classrooms. And then at Broadway in the afternoon, we have a class that we have one aide that's being split between two, and we have students with disabilities on IEPs that we need to make sure we are covering and being in compliance with. So, and we are using CCIP. Those are federal dollars that are designated for students with disabilities. So those are the dollars that are being spent to pay for the aid.
And is this out of restoration?
They are restoration funds. The same, it's just a separate funding that we got this year through federal dollars.
Any questions?
No.
Call roll, please.
Mr. Ventures?
Yes.
Mrs. Heatherly?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunaway?
Yes.
Mr. Spano?
Yes, that motion is approved.
Item E, approval for the following certified teachers to also be a home instruction tutor, and that's for Tasha Thompson.
Motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Joellen and Andy. Questions or comments? We approved the list last month, right? This is just adding in.
This is
adding
adding
one.
an additional
It's-
person. And this is a sheet that's located at the middle school. So, once again, they can serve both middle school and high school, depending on their certification and the student needs. But this is a middle school teacher that is an intervention specialist.
Hearing no other questions, call roll please.
Mrs. Heatherly?
Yes.
Mr. Ventures?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunaway?
Yes.
Mr. Spano?
Yes, that motion is approved.
Item F, approval to hire the following supplemental position for the 2018-19 school year, pending proper certification of, and paperwork. And that, as per the agenda.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second. We got a motion and a second, Joel and myself. Any questions or comments? Call roll please.
Mrs. Heatherly?
Yes.
Mr. Spano?
Yes,
Mrs. Dunaway?
Yes.
Mr. Ventures?
Yes.
motion is approved.
Item G, approval for the following change in contract due to typographical error, as per the agenda.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Motion and second, Teresa and Andy. Any questions? Call roll please.
Mrs. Dunaway?
Yes.
Mr. Ventures?
Yes.
Mrs. Heatherly?
Yes.
Mr. Spano?
Yes, that motion is approved.
Item H, approve the resolution to accept the master plan for the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, OFCC, Expedited Local Partnership Program, ELPP, and there's an attachment.
Motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second. A motion and a second, Andy, myself. Comments, discussion? Questions? Had a lot of discussion at the last meeting about this topic. This is basically allowing us to move forward with the OSCC funding so that we reserve our place on that using the ELP program. It is a necessary requirement for OFCC to move forward with the funding if we are to proceed with the May ballot issue. No other questions or comments? Call roll, please.
Mr. Ventures?
Yes.
Mr. Spano?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunaway?
Yes.
Mrs. Heatherly?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Item I, approval of the Expedited Local Partnership Program, ELP, half-mill maintenance requirement resolution of intent, noting that the district's intent is to delay the half-mill maintenance requirement until the district participates in the Classroom Facilities Assistance Program, CFAP. And there's an attachment with that as well.
I'll make a motion.
A motion
Second?
and a second, Joellen and Andy. Any questions or comments here? Again, just another requirement as part of the ELP program. We can defer the maintenance requirement right now until we actually take part in the assistance program, which is what we're opting to do. Again, just notifying the state as part of the ELP program of our intentions with regard to maintenance.
Yeah, thank you for,
Question?
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
You still talking?
No,
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say to Dave, thank you for sending us that update on Friday, because 108 pages is a lot of information.
Yes.
And especially when I wasn't here this weekend, so that was extremely helpful to me, but, yeah, so you broke that down.
It wasn't crystal clear for you guys? I mean,
We had a week to read it, but you broke it down really nicely, because Joellen and I had a few discussions, and we were trying to, you know, what the heck, I mean, I'm
It's a lot.
not a financial advisor, so, thank you.
Well, I think we're just trying to be clear what we're voting on, and all we're voting on is advancing the opportunity to secure the money through ELP tonight.
Right. So,
All right. Other questions or comments? Call roll, please.
Mrs. Heatherly?
Yes.
Mr. Ventures?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunaway?
Yes.
Mr. Spano?
Yes, that motion is approved.
Item J, approval of the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, OFCC, expedited local partnership program, LELPP, program agreement, and there's an attachment.
Need a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
A motion and a second, Teresa and Andy. Any discussion? This third piece is part of the health program requirements, so. All right, hearing none, please call roll.
Mrs. Dunaway?
Yes.
Mr. Venters?
Yes.
Mrs. Heatherly?
Yes.
Mr. Spano?
Yes, that motion is approved.
Item K, approval to continue the district's membership in the Ohio School Boards Association for the year 2019 at a cost of $5,584.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Got a motion and a second, Joellen and Teresa. Any discussion or comments? Call roll, please.
Mrs. Heatherly?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunaway?
Yes.
Mr. Spano?
Yes,
Mr. Venters?
Yes.
motion is approved.
Item I, approval of joining the 2019 Legal Assistance Fund for the Ohio School Boards Association for a cost of $250 per year.
It's actually L, right?
Did I say that wrong?
I, it's L.
Oh, L.
Yeah.
You're correct.
No,
Thank you.
no,
It is L.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second, Andy and Teresa. Any discussion or comments?
It's a very useful.
Yeah.
But, yes.
I mean,
That is a bargain.
What a bargain.
Yes. Yes.
Call roll, please.
Mr. Venters?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunaway?
Yes.
Mrs. Heatherly?
Yes.
Mr. Spano?
Yes, that motion is approved.
Item M, approval to contract with the Klinginger Group to perform a traffic study around the Hyatt Street campus for a cost not to exceed $10,960.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Motion and a second, myself and Joellen. Any discussion or comments?
I know this is important information that we're eager to receive to help us do the best plan possible for that traffic area as we look at building construction and renovation.
Do you know when they're supposed to start?
That was my
Oh.
question too.
After the first of the year. In there.
Right after.
On
Right.
Google.
Okay, because we have a meeting Friday, because there's that one aspect that I want to hammer out before we, okay, good. All right, good. Well, thank you for taking the time to get all the bids, go through it. That's a lot of work for you. People don't realize how much work goes into a little agenda item like that. So, appreciate that.
All right, no other comments, questions? Call roll, please.
Mr. Spano?
Yes.
Mrs. Heatherly?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunaway?
Yes?
Mr. Spano? No, Mr. Venters?
Yes.
That motion is approved.
Item N, approval to purchase two 2019 Bluebird Vision 72-passenger school buses from Cardinal Bus Sales for a total purchase price of $161,140. One bus will be paid for out of general fund, and one bus will be paid for out of permanent improvement fund. And there's an attachment as well.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second, Andy and Joellen. Any questions or comments? Call roll, please.
Mr. Venters?
Yes.
Mrs. Heatherly?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunaway?
Yes?
Mr. Spano?
Yes. Motion is approved.
Item O, approval for the use of 5 school buses and bus drivers to provide transportation for LT Ball 5th graders to attend Camp Kern on February 15th and 16th, 2019. All costs to be paid by Tipp Community Services.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Got a motion and a second, Teresa and Andy. Any discussion?
I think our 5th graders are having a very positive experience at Camp Kern through the Monroe Township services.
Does 5 buses seem like a lot?
It does seem like quite a bit, but
Because I don't
that would-
remember ever being 5, but they have the same amount of
stuff.
Yeah, they do
their
have
stuff.
all of their bedding
Here.
gear and all that, so,
Right.
yes.
It's not like you're cramming 3 kids per seat with a I mean, I get that, but I just don't ever remember it being 5 buses, so,
It's a big class.
yeah, no big deal.
5 does seem like a number, but
Yeah, because you
apparently I
figure
think they
50
have
kids
it
per bus,
projected.
that's
Yeah.
250, there's only 200 per grade. Okay. I trust them on that.
All right, call roll, please.
Mrs. Dunaway?
Yes?
Mr. Venters?
Yes.
Mrs. Heatherly?
Yes?
Mr. Spano?
Yes, the motion is approved.
Item P, approval of the following out-of-state overnight trips as per the agenda.
Ooh, Connie.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. Andy and Joellen. Any comments or questions?
I'll just say that they are related to our quiz team, and our quiz team does a great job.
You're so good.
All right, call roll, please.
Give me one moment. Mr. Venters?
Yes.
Mrs. Heatherly?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunaway?
Yes?
Mr. Spano?
Yes, the motion is approved.
You know, this is gonna get really confusing. Well, never mind. I'll keep that comment to myself. I thought when the president changes and everything, but it doesn't matter. It's whoever's first and second, so.
All right, item Q, approval to accept $17,069 in grant dollars for the from the Tippecanoe Educational Endowment. And there is an attachment with that.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second, Teresa and Joellen. Any comments or questions?
No, very generous.
Very
That
generous.
is a lot.
A great variety, and I'll just highlight real quick, we have one part of it's going to the 2019 Science Fair for the state recognition for those that have registration fees for that move on. One's connected to project-based learning, that's out of Nebenkopic. An additional one that is about play-based learning materials out of Nebenkopic, as well as at Broadway at Johnston Farms, at Broadway at Flexible Seating, for the library, and then at LT Ball, the Carillon Historical Park, as well as virtual reality headsets. As we continue on to the middle school, so there's quite a list, this is quite exciting. One that goes to the kitchen flipper flop that connects with the consumer science area at the middle school. One that is connected to an author visit, and an additional one that is connected to a courtyard project. And then we have the final one there at the middle school is connected to an 8th grade student leadership with some t-shirts that would help identify those student leaders. At our high school, we have a digital photography out of the art department. We have an LGBT student support and awareness materials. And then we also have building code compliance materials, as well as document camera for visual learners and language arts. So very, very generous, and a total of $17,069.
And they were able to give out all their funds.
Yes.
They had more requests than they had funds
Correct.
available.
We had actually numerous requests that were over that budget, which is great. We had a great turnout of applications this time.
Our teachers are doing a great job of grant writing and submission.
So, I believe this is probably the most money we've ever received in a one-time.
I didn't ask that question, but I'm sure it is because especially from T.
Right.
Yeah.
Miami County sometimes
That
gets some
was
pretty high
big.
numbers, but from T.
So again, very generous
Yeah,
and.
it's
and
great.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments?
No.
Call
Well, on
roll.
that one where it says $920, should it be LGBTQ? Or is that like, isn't there always a Q on there? I thought it was, am I wrong? Student support and awareness materials, LGBTQ?
I think it may be.
I mean, it's not a big deal, but I'm just, sometimes we change the names on things, then I feel like I can't keep up with all the name changes, but I thought there was a Q.
I think it's a typographical omission.
Okay. Because, they change the stuff and you can't keep up with the name changes, so. Okay, thank you, that's all, silly question.
All right, call roll, please.
Mrs. Dunaway,
Yes,
Mrs. Heatherly,
Yes,
Mr. Spano,
Yes,
Mr. Venters.
Yes.
that motion is approved. That concludes new business unless someone else has some other new business. All right, miscellaneous. We have one board policy that has been provided to us for the first read. We will vote on that at the January regular meeting.
to clarify, how was that provided to us? Was that an attachment on a Friday board update?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
And I'm sorry,
Which
that
one
I
was
was
it?
looking just now to see if the attachment was in there, and it is not.
Okay.
And that's on the blended learning, and when we talk about the blended learning, that's the aspect of
Okay.
our online component with that.
Okay,
Yes.
so we'll get that then to review.
Yes, and did you not get it this last
that's what I,
time?
that's what I was thinking, I
I'll
don't
make-
remember seeing
I'll
it
make
Friday.
It was in the last Friday board update,
was?
I
Okay.
believe.
Okay.
I remember seeing
Don't,
that.
you don't?
No, you're
I'll
good,
go
I'll
back and
reference
get it.
back, you're
Okay.
fine, we were just
But
discussing.
the other thing is, under the policies with Neola, there's a, and board docs,
Yeah, you
there's a
have
way
to-
to see new
Correct.
board policies. If
Right.
you search properly, it's a little tricky.
Take that
but-
class, I'll take it with you, 'cause I can't find it.
Yeah, if you look under draft policies and then policies recommended for the BOE, there are the two there, blended
Thank
learning
you.
and purchases.
It must have been the 108 pages of
Just
document
overwhelmed.
that
Yeah.
caused me to overlook. that.
After 108,
I got
everything
to
else
60
kind
and
of
was like, I'm
blends in.
done.
Yeah. Yeah,
All
it's
right.
not fun.
And then, our next, our upcoming meetings, we have, January 7th is our reorganization meeting with, 5:45 being a records meeting. Board attendance is not required for that meeting. I'm just president. 6 PM is the reorganization meeting, and then we're gonna do a workshop beginning at 6:30 PM. All right. That's all I have for the meeting. We have an executive session to consider employment of a public employee or official. I need a motion for that purpose.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Have a motion and a second. Teresa and Andy. Call roll, please.
Mrs. Dunaway,
Yes.
Mr. Venters,
Yes.
Mrs. Heatherly,
Yes.
and Mr. Spano.
Yes, that motion is approved. I do not anticipate any action tonight with regard to this matter. We'll take a 5-minute recess and reconvene for executive
I
session.
think you're going to want to, I think you're still.
Very good. Happy holidays, everyone.